We've had less than 24 hours to absorb the verdict and what actually happened in that Minneapolis courtroom. Chauvin, as we said, now stands convicted of murder. His sentencing is set for some 8 weeks from now. But what does that verdict mean for the future of policing? Was this an inflection point that will really spur substantive change? Our viewers know we have turned to retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey to give us her perspective throughout the years and throughout this trial as she joins us now. And Cheryl, you and I have worked together many years, and it's really nice to see a friend again and talk to you about this. I've been asking people that we've been speaking with this morning to take me back to the moment that you heard those verdicts. How did you react?
I was pleasantly surprised because I really expected, with all the subterfuge and distraction that the DA was throwing at the jury, that he would find one person who was like-minded. And so now we have guilty on all 3 charges. We knew that Derek Chauvin was who he was. He showed us. We're aware now that there's 22 personnel complaints and only once has he ever been disciplined. And so they've got some explaining to do over there on that police department. And more importantly, Michaela, the district attorney, in my opinion, has to look at every case that he's touched over his 19-year career. They're all tainted now. How many other Black men, women, and maybe even children has he harmed? Has he incarcerated? When a cop puts hands on you like he did Mr. Floyd, you're going to go to jail, even though it may be a DA reject later.
Well, we certainly know that Merrick Garland, the AG, has directed the Justice Department to delve into what has been happening in the Minneapolis Police Department. I want to ask you, I talked earlier about the fact that you and I have covered so many of these stories together. We've had on these conversations on the air in the aftermath of these deaths, these shootings of Black men by police. What was different this time to you, Sergeant?
What was different this time is that we had command staff, we had on-scene supervisors testifying truthfully under oath, as they were required, mandated to do, about the use of force, the unnecessariness, unreasonableness of that force, contrary to their training. And it doesn't get any higher than the police chief, but we heard from the police chief, a commander, a lieutenant, and the field sergeant all spoke to, this is not how we teach and train our officers. This was something that he improvised, and we know that he's used before because we heard that in 2015, there were at least 6 other people that he treated very similar. And so that was different publicly, to hear officers speak out.
You are a public face of law enforcement. You have been speaking for so many years on the air about these things, but you've done so much time on the streets in uniform yourself. You were trained the same way other police officers were trained. So you bring a different perspective to this. You bring a different perspective to that video. We're not going to show it. We've seen it too many times already. The over 9 minutes, his knee on George Floyd's neck. What came up in you when you saw that?
Well, I was bothered by it, you know, as a Black woman first. I was certainly outraged as a supervisor because I know that this is not how we train our officers. And I knew that Derek Chauvin was minimizing and mitigating the behavior. We heard on his body cam how he lied to the sergeant. And he says, yeah, the guy was out of control. He was acting crazy. We had to lay him down on the ground. He neglected to say, oh, and by the way, I sat on him for 8 or 9 minutes. And so all of it was very problematic. And listen, every department has at least one Derek Chauvin. We know that they're there, and we've seen police chiefs, supervisors, captains, and the like look the other way. And so I'm happy that DOJ is looking into this, and I hope that police chiefs will create safe zones where officers can report bad doers and avoid civil liability.
So, you know, we heard from family members and people on the ground there in Minneapolis that, you know, this wasn't so much justice, because justice would be George Floyd walking the streets of Minneapolis, loving his family and alive and well. This is what accountability looks like. To you, further to this accountability, what more needs to happen? We know that this is likely a turning point, but what more still needs to be done, Cheryl, Sergeant Dorsey, as far as you're concerned?
We need to take a look at qualified immunity. It needs to be dismantled. Certainly, officers need to be decertified when they violate policy and or law, so that they don't get the gift of resignation, as in the case of Dante Wright, and then move on to another department, as in the case of Betty Shelby, who shot and killed Terrence Crutcher. And so officers need to be decertified. so that they can't live to offend again. And if you can't get rid of an officer, because we know the officer who shot Jacob Blake in the back 7 times just was reinstated, take him out of patrol, put him on the desk, give him a box of flares, let him pass out equipment so that he can't hurt another person out in the field.
Retired Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, I'm so glad to have you with us. Good to see you, my friend. You stay well, and we'll lean on you again, okay? Hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Not necessarily on a case just like this. And by the way, here's her book, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. Congratulations on the book, Sergeant Dorsey. Good to see that you have been thriving in your retirement. Lots of work for you still to do. All right, let's go over to Maria.